Anthem of the Sun. As time went by, life in the Haight became considerably less appealing due to the continuing hassles of tourists and cops, and thus at the end of 1968, the Dead packed up and moved to laid-back Marin County. Now playing regularly at prestigious venues on both coasts, the Dead were rapidly becoming popular with their long-haired constituents for their freewheeling jams, improvised solos, and airy, loose-fitting melodies. Yet strangely, their recorded work failed to reflect much of what made the band so compelling live and in the eyes of their loyal fans. In June of 1969, the group's third LP was released, featuring such now classic numbers as China Cat, What's Become of the Baby, and the evergreen St. Stephen's. Several brilliant albums followed, including Working Man's Dead and American Beauty. In 1971, the Dead finally achieved a commercial breakthrough when their double live album Grateful Dead went gold. Other works included Bear's Choice, consisting of live material culled from a particularly inspirational 1970 Fillmore East concert. In addition, there was Skeletons from the Closet, What a Long Strange Trip It's Been, Live from the Mars Hotel, and the justifiably jazzy and ambitious Blues for Allah. On the home front, meanwhile, things were decidedly shaky. Mickey Hart's father, Lenny, had come aboard as manager in 1971 and then disappeared with $70,000 of the band's money. Distraught, Hart temporarily left the band. Compounding the group's woes were Pigpen's excessive drinking and drugging, resulting in his untimely death in March of 1973. He was eventually replaced by Keith Godshaw on vocals and his wife Donna, who contributed backing vocals. One of the most interesting aspects of the Dead, apart from their laid-back, soul-stirring sound, was their unusual name and logo consisting of a grinning, garlanded skull. In her book Grateful Dead, author Kay Rowley outlines the unique origins of both. The term grateful, she writes, came from a catalogue by one Francis Childs, a 19th-century musicologist. He had traveled about Northern Ireland and Scotland collecting folk songs and had put together a section on dead ballads, songs lamenting someone's death and dishonor, which, only when honor had been restored, could the deceased actually find peace. The name provided the perfect inspiration for designer Alton Kelly to use as a poster design. He borrowed an image from a 19th-century edition of Omar Khayyam's Rubaiyat of a skeleton wearing a garland of roses. Kelly first used the logo as a backdrop for a concert at the famous Avalon Ballroom in September of 1966, but it has since become one of the Dead's most visible trademarks. The dichotomy of the Grateful Dead's remarkable success as a live band and their almost complete lack of recognition as recording artists finally prompted them to form their own label, Grateful Dead Records, in the late 1970s. Wake of the Flood, their initial offering, did surprisingly well, selling just under 500,000 copies within weeks of its release. Unfortunately, the Dead's private label eventually suffered the same fate as many other artist-owned companies and sank under its own weight. Their second double live album, Steal Your Face, recorded at the Winterland in 1974, was about as bad as it gets. As author Rowley remarks, the playing is poor, the recording appalling, and the track schedule completely untypical of a Dead set. The band picked itself up after this humiliating debacle and once again hit the road with Mickey Hart, who had again rejoined the group. As they gathered momentum as a touring group, there developed a phenomenon we now know as the Deadheads, young hippie types whose lives revolved around the Dead. Unwilling to function in the straight world, they gave themselves fully to the primal enjoyment emanating from their musical beacon, the Grateful Dead, and gradually evolved a genuine cultural movement. These happy-go-lucky souls tie-dyed their clothes in bold, psychedelic patterns and sought refuge in a nomadic, less material, more essentially spiritual way of life. Having reached the end of the line with Warner Brothers, the Dead signed with Clive Davis's Arista Records in 1977. Their debut for Arista, Terrapin Station, was an album which not only reflected the Dead's populist philosophy of easy accessibility, but was also very commercial. Beyond that, Terrapin Station has now become a kind of catchphrase for Deadheads, turning up on T-shirts, bumper stickers, and even over the doors of several head shops throughout America. Also around this time, a Grateful Dead film project that had been in the works for several years finally began to take shape. The band had amassed roughly 200 hours of loosely organized concert footage, and once it was edited and packaged into a documentary, it became a best-selling video around the world. One of the most unusual events ever staged by the group was their September 1978 three-night concert in Egypt, where the Dead played